The day unfolded in a typical fashion until I returned home from work and was greeted by my wife, Victoria. "Joseph, please take a seat. We must speak," she stated in a grave tone. I could discern immediately that this conversation would result in some unfortunate news. "I am sorry to inform you that I have already relocated and initiated divorce proceedings." She appeared to be rehearsing her lines as she spoke rapidly and avoided eye contact. She extended her hand across the table and handed me a manila package. "Where are the children?" I was taken aback by this abrupt change in topic. I relocated the children and informed her that they would be staying with me, but reassured her that she would have ample opportunity for visitation. I had met someone else, and the relationship had not been satisfactory. Given the circumstances, it is understandable that there might be some tension between us. However, it is difficult to imagine a scenario in which things could be amicable when you are in a relationship with someone else. I am sorry for this turn of events. I am truly sorry. I wish things could have been different. I have to do what is best for the children and me. I am curious about this individual's identity. I asked, my anger growing. I am not going to divulge that information because it would only cause problems. Therefore, I am taking my wife and children from me, but you believe you can evade any difficulties. You are mistaken if you think you can speak in such a way and expect a different response. I am leaving, she said as she stood up and walked out the door. Although her actions were surprising, they were not entirely out of the ordinary. We had not shared a kiss in months and had not communicated as a married couple in about a year. I had made numerous attempts to speak with her. Since I had the impression that something was amiss, Victoria repeatedly asserted that everything was merely in my imagination and that there was no problem. Indeed, Victoria was an attractive woman. She had excellent taste in clothing and knew how to wear it. I should have been paying closer attention to her instead of working 6 days a week to build a life for us. We played golf at the municipal course, but she preferred the country club. When she went there with a friend, we had an ongoing argument about joining the club. I wanted to wait a few years, but Victoria wanted the good life now. I was willing to bet her new man was a member or would be soon, though I had thought about it. I never had a private investigator watch her. Perhaps I ought to have done so. The question remains, however, as to what difference it would have made. The first time she had engaged in sexual intercourse with another man, our marriage was effectively over. I contacted the attorney I use for my business, who then referred me to a divorce attorney. I was able to secure an appointment the following day. I informed him that my primary concern was the welfare of our children. I sought to ascertain their whereabouts and the schedule for my visitation rights. From my wife's attorney, we learned that she and the children were residing in a house owned by Anthony Walder. He was approximately 10 years her senior and was a member of the country club set. It appeared that Victoria had elected to replace me with a husband who possessed greater financial resources, a more expansive residence, and a country club membership. My attorney met with me and conveyed the unfortunate news. Victoria was a stay-at-home at that moment. I was rendered speechless. She was a homemaker, and she would receive custody of the children and likely half of my business. That evening represented the nadir of my life. I was living alone in an empty house. My children were residing in another man's home, and my wife was sleeping in his bed. I had spent years working diligently to support my family and create a better life and future for them. Now, I had been discarded. My family was gone, and I heated up a frozen dinner, only to find that Victoria had taken all of the knives, forks, and spoons. I looked around and found a plastic fork and sat down to eat my meal. That plastic fork was the last straw. I swore an oath to myself right then and there that this situation would not stand, regardless of what I had to do or what the cost might be. I was determined to take action. 8 years prior to our marriage, I had been running my own equipment rental company. Although business was despite the company's success, I was not withdrawing significant cash from it. The majority of profits were reinvested in the company, and I was purchasing new equipment at a rapid pace. I had informed Victoria on numerous occasions that we needed to be more economical in our personal lives. However, every dollar invested in new equipment would eventually generate a return of tenfold in equipment rentals. Victoria preferred immediate gratification. Flying first class and receiving a massage at the club, Victoria was amenable to allowing me access to the children. Cheryl, aged 7, and David, aged 5, were at my house every other weekend, and I took them out to eat on a weekly basis. This was not my preferred arrangement, but my attorney advised me that it was preferable to the alternatives. He suggested that I adopt a more proactive approach to the divorce proceedings. While I did not have the legal high ground, I did have the moral high ground. It was unlikely that my wife's actions, including playing around on me and walking out with the children and moving in with her lover, would be well received in our community. I needed to use this to my advantage. If I resorted to violence or vindictiveness, I would lose my moral position. My attorney also pointed out that my wife likely felt guilty about her actions and was probably facing pressure from friends, family, and our children. These were advantages for our side. I followed his advice and attempted to suppress my anger. It was a challenging process, but I was determined to regain control. My lawyer was correct when he said that friends and neighbors were astonished. Even Victoria's own relatives did not support her. I received a call from her parents inquiring about a reconciliation. I informed them that their daughter needed to communicate with me directly. I was not involved in the dissolution of the relationship. Victoria returned to the residence one evening to converse with me. She attempted to persuade me that our separation was beneficial and that we could discuss the matter and everything would be well. Victoria, observe this house. It is an empty shell. I am no longer married. I have no children. I no longer have a life. This is no longer a home, it is merely a house. Victoria, you have caused significant disruption. Victoria was in a hurry to move on with her new partner. At this point, she was in tears, so I asked her to leave. The children were a source of information regarding the changes in Victoria's life. However, the most reliable information came from friends. Typically, Victoria would tell a friend, who would then tell their husband, who would then tell me. I was careful to play golf with my friends on a regular basis. I did not need to ask questions, my friends were eager to share what they knew. The dissolution of the relationship was a topic of great interest for several months. I discovered that Victoria was not the individual who initiated the infidelity. Anthony had been interested in her for an extended period and gradually gained her affections. Victoria's legal counsel proposed a 60% division of our assets. My legal representative recognized this as an attempt to swiftly reach a settlement. Victoria did not require my financial contribution. Anthony already possessed sufficient resources. We opted to await further developments. I decided to wait and see if we could achieve a superior outcome. I subsequently learned through informal channels that Victoria and Anthony were planning a June wedding. The country club had already been reserved. This was Anthony's first wedding, so he was attempting to optimize the circumstances. There was sufficient time for Victoria to obtain a divorce and have a June wedding under ordinary circumstances. However, my attorney was confident he could extend the proceedings until then. He inquired as to whether I would require a trip to Europe for business purposes in the near future. I informed him that I believed I would need to investigate a new line of generators manufactured in Scotland. Victoria's attorney was able to discern the underlying motives behind my actions and inquired as to the conditions necessary for a prompt divorce. I was inclined to suggest that she should be granted nothing, however, my attorney advised against this course of action, emphasizing that it would not be well received in a legal setting. Instead, he suggested offering her something, as it would appear more equitable. An offer was made to Victoria that would expire in 10 years or, alternatively, in 5 years if she accepted the offer within a period of 5 years. The offer was for 50% of the sale price of the house, and it was made clear that this was not to include money, alimony, child support, or a share of the company. She accepted the offer without hesitation. It was at this point that I insisted on having the wedding invitations printed. The language of the agreement made it plain that this was a final deal. I was not willing to entertain the possibility of Victoria coming back later for more money. I had ceased purchasing large amounts of equipment. Following Victoria's departure, I purchased a few items on credit. I began saving cash as much as possible. The divorce was finalized in February, allowing me sufficient time to prepare for the wedding. As soon as I was free, I began searching for a house. I soon found a 5-bedroom house with a pool and an in-law apartment over the garage. It had a large yard for the children and was situated on a spacious lot. I took a significant bonus from the business to purchase the house. I paid cash for the house and placed the old house up for rent so that I would not have to pay Victoria her 50% until the 10 years were up. On a Friday, I picked up the children from school and took them to the new house. They loved it, so I called Victoria and informed her of the new address, which she was to use to pick up the children on Sunday when she arrived. Upon seeing the house, she was astonished, asking how I could afford it. I reminded her that I had always told her that the business would pay. One day, Victoria, I must ask whether you believed me when I said I could afford this house. You should have remained patient for longer, but Joseph, the mortgage must be a significant burden. I paid cash for the house, Victoria. You should have paid more attention to the business. The rental inventory alone is valued at over $5 million. Joseph, I had no idea. I had no idea at all. I could see regret in her eyes. I told you often enough, Victoria. It is regrettable that you did not listen. I joined the country club and had the pleasure of watching Victoria and Anthony's reaction when I ran into them at the bar. Seeing them together was difficult for me, but I know it was worse for them having me around. Victoria kept looking over at me. I think she was experiencing buyer's remorse. Well, at least I hope that was what it was. One of my oldest customers was Al. He rented generators and temporary heating and air conditioning units on a regular basis. I also knew he was connected. I had a very private conversation. I was gratified to observe the reactions of Victoria and Anthony when I encountered them at the bar. It was challenging for me to witness their interaction, but I recognized that it was more distressing for them. Victoria frequently glanced in my direction, and I believe she was experiencing a sense of regret. At the very least, I hope that was the case. One of my most long-standing customers was Al, who rented generators and temporary heating and air conditioning units on a regular basis. I was also aware that he had connections within the community. I had a candid discussion with him. In my conversation with Al, I emphasized that I wanted the incident to appear to be an accident. However, he informed me that the accident aspect would incur additional costs. He suggested that he could facilitate the process by acting as a middleman, charging a fee of approximately 1/3 of the total cost. I was amenable to the idea of Al being my sole point of contact and the only individual aware of my identity. The additional expense would be justified, I reasoned, given the circumstances. Approximately a week later, Al responded, indicating that the cost would be 75 boxes of ZD. I provided him with the necessary clearance, reminding him that the task had to be completed before June's wedding. As the wedding date drew near, I grew increasingly concerned. Less than a week before the ceremony, Anthony Walder was discovered deceased in a modest motel just outside of town. It appears that Anthony had been engaged in celebratory activities at his bachelor party the night before his demise. There were reports of a stripper, and as the evening drew to a close, 2 attractive women approached Anthony and led him away from the party. The other attendees assumed they were prostitutes hired to entertain the groom. They accompanied him to a motel, where he proceeded to snort cocaine and heroin. This ultimately proved fatal. In my estimation, the motion picture Pulp Fiction features a visual resemblance between heroin and cocaine. However, the act of snorting either substance is ill-advised. It is regrettable that John Travolta was not present to intervene on Anthony's behalf. I do not harbor any remorse for his demise. Had he survived, I would have spent the subsequent 2 decades observing him as a potential father figure to my children. I had envisioned myself attending a wedding in the rear of a church. The wedding of the young girl while the malefactor walked her down the aisle was an impossibility. The expenditure of $75,000 was the most prudent decision I ever made. It is my understanding that the prostitutes were never located, nor was the identity of the individual who hired them to entertain the groom ever determined. The encouraging news was that the authorities concluded that there was no foul play involved. A couple of days after the funeral, I visited Anthony's grave and stuck a plastic fork into the eye had been saving it. Victoria was understandably disappointed at Anthony's death. I am aware that this is an understatement, but I did not care how upset she was that her ideal life had become a nightmare. Welcome to the club. It was 3 months after the funeral that an attorney showed up at Victoria's door. He was very polite about it, but the Anthony family wanted to know when Victoria and her children were planning to relocate. She was not Anthony's wife and was not mentioned in his will. Furthermore, she had been using credit cards registered in her name to charge wedding-related expenses. As a result, she was now unemployed and without financial support. Victoria sought the assistance of her attorney, who requested an urgent modification to the divorce proceedings. However, the judge was not persuaded. He was impressed with her lack of income and recommended that she secure employment. He highlighted that Victoria had been content with the terms of the agreement just a few months prior. Additionally, he drew the court's attention to the final agreement language above Victoria's signature, emphasizing that Anthony Walder and his financial contributions were never part of that agreement. Consequently, as far as the court was concerned, his demise did not alter the terms of the agreement. One of Victoria's attorneys was providing me with the proceedings were met with a certain degree of scrutiny. It was evident that the timing of Anthony Walder's demise, occurring as it did between the dissolution of the marriage and the wedding, was not ideal for Victoria. My attorney was quick to point out that, given the imminent threat of homelessness, it would be prudent for the children to reside with me. It is worth noting that Victoria's parents resided in a one-bedroom condominium. The children were to be residing in a bedroom condominium. Victoria had obtained sole physical custody, a status that now required modification. My attorney advanced the argument that sole physical custody should be transferred to me. I possessed a stable home and the financial resources to hire a full-time nanny. He additionally noted that, due to my ex-wife's in accordance with the financial stipulations of the divorce, I did not request child support. This decision was met with disappointment by Victoria. However, the judge concurred with my attorney's assessment. Following the proceedings, we made arrangements for the children to be relocated to my residence the following day. Victoria was visibly distressed, yet I remained unmoved. I did, however, request a lunch meeting with her later that day. Following a discussion about the housekeeper and nanny, having Cheryl and David with me was beneficial. My sister relocated for a few days to assist with their settling in and facilitate a reconnection. During lunch, I informed my ex-wife that I would like her to assume the role of housekeeper and nanny. She was uncertain about the proposal. I reiterated my sincerity and emphasized the potential for an in-house arrangement. The apartment is yours to occupy, and in return for your services, you will receive $400 per week plus room and board. Perhaps the most appealing aspect of this arrangement is that you will be able to spend every day with your children. However, it is important to consider the potential drawbacks of this proposal. Joseph, it is essential to identify the potential challenges associated with this agreement. Victoria, it is necessary to establish a few ground rules. Firstly, you will be required to refrain from engaging in any romantic relationships while residing in the house. The second rule is that I must be able to contact you at all times and at any place. Victoria was taken aback. She could not believe that I would agree to such a condition. She was certain that I would never agree to be her slave. She was not going to allow me to treat her in such a manner. She would not allow me to call her master or use any other form of address that indicated a master-slave relationship. She was not going to allow me to harm her. She was prepared for a few slaps, but nothing more. Victoria sat quietly for several minutes, contemplating her next move. After several minutes, he inquired as to whether she would be permitted to maintain her friendships. At that moment, I was certain that she would accept the terms of the agreement. She would be permitted to have any friends she desired, but she would not be permitted to bring them to the house or flaunt them in Joseph's presence. We would engage in activities together as a couple, such as golf, movies, and social gatherings. However, we would not be married. She would never be married. Those days were over. If she treated me with respect and kindness, we could have a mutually beneficial relationship. If the service is provided with a smile, then things will be good. If I am treated right and with respect, I will do the same in return. You still have my last name, we will live in the same house and share the same children. However, I will never again give you my trust. We will never be married, and I will throw you out with nothing if you ever cross me, disrespect me, or refuse me. Victoria moved into the in-law apartment. The following day, the children were pleased to have us reunited. I permitted Victoria to settle in the first night, but on the second night, I informed her to take a shower and come to my room at 11 p.m. Please wear something appropriate for the occasion. You have one last opportunity to retain your virginity tonight. Victoria was initially reluctant, but I proceeded at a leisurely pace. I believe she has come to appreciate the situation, although she is not yet fully compliant. Things proceeded smoothly for a while, but then one day she failed to appear for my morning routine. That evening, I brought home a large dog cage and assembled it in the walk-in closet. In the closet of the master bedroom, I informed her that, should she fail to comply with my instructions in the future, she would be required to spend time in the cage. Victoria's attitude improved, and she has only been locked in the cage approximately once a month over the following 2 years. This is regrettable, as when I return home, I click the lock on her cage, turn off the light, and shut the closet door on my caged ex-partner. My wife and I have a very different dynamic now than we did before she left. I would never have treated her the way I do now, even though I always treated her with respect. I had always treated her like a lady, but now when it comes to our sex life, I just don't care. I even lock her in a cage when we are with the kids or with friends. We get along like a normal couple. Will she cheat on me again? I don't know, but I don't think so. I am indifferent to the possibility of her infidelity. If she does engage in such behavior, she will have to maintain its secrecy. The pivotal question is whether I still love her. I am uncertain as to whether I do. Before Victoria's departure, I considered myself to be living a life of perfection, a manifestation of the American dream. However, I am currently uncertain as to my emotional state when I observe her caring for a sick child. I do, in fact, love her. On Christmas morning, I entered the kitchen and observed her seated at the table with paperwork. This was the same table where she informed me of her intention to leave me with the children. At that moment, I did not love her. My life is no longer perfect, and it is unlikely to ever be so again. However, I am no longer residing in an unoccupied house, eating a frozen dinner. I will never again allow her to gain the upper hand, even if it means eating dinner with a plastic fork. I will never again allow her to take my children away from me. I will never marry her again, at least not in this lifetime. I recognize that these are extreme positions, but they are my current stance. I must go. David has a soccer game, and tonight is a PTA meeting at the children's school. Life goes on, except for Anthony.